I want to start with this year's global message, which is the day you embrace peace, the day you embrace peace and love and happiness will walk eternally with you. So let me start that again. The day you embrace peace, love and happiness will walk eternally with you. I want to talk about a number of things. Recently, I wrote a book, Wheeling to Healing, Broken Heart on a Bicycle, Understanding and Healing Adverse Childhood Experiences. And you can find the book on New 72 Media's website. And it's about my own journey from violence to nonviolence. This morning, as I was doing my early morning contemplation meditation, I asked God to give me the words to speak this morning and to fill my mind with the thoughts. And one of the, interestingly enough, today's contemplation, which is from Father Richard Rohr. He's a Franciscan priest who has these daily meditations in which he reframes the neglected or misunderstood teachings of Christianity and helps us to see that God is not a judgmental being who punishes us, but rather God is a loving being. So today, let me begin with today's daily meditation, which is titled Nonviolence, written by Father Richard. Because it is crucial to our understanding of nonviolence, let me repeat, the root of violence is the illusion of separation from God, from being itself, from being somehow one with everyone and everything. Most of our conflicts arise from a very fragile sense of self. When we're full of fear, the enemy is everywhere. We endlessly look for the problem outside of ourselves so we can expel or exterminate it. If a prophetic peacemaker attempts to take our chosen object of hatred away from us, we turn our hatred on them. Jesus, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and many others were persecuted or killed because they challenged the myth of scapegoating. If we don't own our own evil, we will always project it elsewhere and attack it there. Only people who recognize their own evil, or at least their complicity in evil, stop this unconscious scapegoating pattern. Their experience of radical union with God makes it possible for them to own their shadow, their own capacity for evil, and no need to hate it in other people. Fully conscious people do not scapegoat. Unconscious people do almost nothing else. So I'm going to stop there. I'm a storyteller, and I'll begin with my journey. I grew up in domestic violence. I learned how to hate. I wasn't born hating. I experienced regular abuse of my mother when I was little. And that filled my heart with a lot of hatred. I also, becoming her protector because I was the oldest, developed a very conflicted relationship with my father. And at the age of 26, I put a knife to his throat. That was over 30 some years ago. So I guess the question is, how did I get here? And where is here? So I'm going to read you where I am through the words of a poet, a Mexican poet by the name of Amado Nervo. Very near my sunset, I bless you, life. because you never gave me neither unfulfilled hope, nor unfair work, nor undeserved sorrow. Because I see at the end of my rough way that I was the architect of my own destiny. And if I extract the sweetness or the bitterness of things, it was because I put the sweetness or the bitterness in them. When I planted rose bushes, I always harvested roses. Certainly, winter is going to follow my youth, but you didn't tell me that May was eternal. I found without a doubt long my nights of pain, but you didn't promise me only good nights. And in exchange, I had some peaceful ones. I loved, I was loved. The sun caressed my face. Life, you owe me nothing. Life, we are at peace. It takes work. And it begins with us, with ourselves. Many of us have faced adversity in our lives. Many of us have many different reasons to hate. There's a difference between achieving peace or this concept of peace and acting on it. There's a difference between pacifism and nonviolence. And the only way that we're going to get to peace is through nonviolence. Nonviolence is an action. Nonviolence is a doing. And it begins with us. I've been working on a guidebook to the book. And in it, I tell these stories and then attach them to exercises. I want you to share the story of a man I'll call Hidalgo. Hidalgo brought to life for us what a father's loss and war do to a child and how they shaped a man. It's one thing to know, as we now do, that the absence of a father due to incarceration, death, separation, or divorce has adverse physical and behavioral consequences for a growing child. It's another to see and hear the stories of such a life. Hidalgo's memories of the first years of childhood in El Salvador were lovely ones. The family was not rich, but they were happy and never lacked for anything. His father, who he remembers to have always been a hard worker, owned a small farm. They had livestock, a couple of sheep, plenty of chickens, and a cow from which they got all they needed. But then the war came, and life was forever changed. Hidalgo was a tall, lean man, well-muscled, man of few words. When he spoke, which was usually measured and not often, we all sat up and listened. It was easy to believe that during his 3-year prison stint, he was asked to become an enforcer, a request he refused because he didn't believe in hurting someone who hadn't hurt him first. As time went on, the stories got more personal, and it became evident that his need to tell them was a need to free himself of the demons he silently carried for so long. He told us that one day during the war, the cheerful walks home from the fields after a hard day's work, pulled by the smell of his mother's cooking, became walks he dreaded once the war began. The cemetery he crossed on the way to and from home became a dumping ground of dead bodies, uncovered bodies of those killed by both the army and the guerrillas that were fighting against each other. During one of these dreaded-filled walks, his life was forever changed. A truck of soldiers pulled up alongside him, and they took his father and his oldest brother, who at the time was 14. At gunpoint, they forced them onto the truck, and Hidalgo stood there screaming. In fact, he screamed and cried so much that eventually they threw his brother off the truck, but not his father. He never saw his father again. And it was at that point that his heart began to harden and he began to hate. I asked Hidalgo and the men that I worked with who came to me to reflect on these experiences that life had given him, to better understand these experiences and why they did what they did. I didn't look at what was wrong with them, I looked at what happened to them. And I tried to teach them to love rather than to hate. And the work that I do in dealing with domestic violence, which is an issue that I want to end in this world, I find a lot of people conflicted by the fact that how to deal with men like myself. Because having grown up in that environment, that's all I knew how to do. And so I brought that into my marriage. I never physically went there because of the things that I saw as a child, but what I did was worse, actually. I was verbally and emotionally abusive. I think it's Maya Angelou who says something to the effect of, you'll forget what someone did to you, but you'll never forget how they made you feel. So obviously, Hidalgo was a broken man, and he took that and he hurt other people in his life, hurt his wife and his children. And there was a lot of anger when he stepped into the room. But through thinking about other ways of being, through providing him tools, poetry, something he'd never encountered, I started to see Hidalgo change from a man of hatred to a man of peace. I want to share a poem that I hope makes you and makes us think about the concept of forgiveness. It's by a man by the name of Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Buddhist monk and a peace activist, author of several books that contain great wisdom, especially his book titled Anger. It's a poem about the power of forgiveness, love, and peace. It's called Please Call Me by My True Names. Don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today, I am still arriving. Look deeply every second. I am arriving. To be a bud on a spring branch. To be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my nest. To be the caterpillar in the heart of a flower. To be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am a mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am a frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skins and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of loving, of seeing. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands, and I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like rivers of tears, so vast it fills 4 oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names so I can wake up and the door of my heart could be left open, the door of compassion. As we sat reflecting on this in the class, I could see Hidalgo thinking and feeling these words. I think teaching men how to love requires that we heal them and transform them and not punish and judge them. By holding a doggo, a man who'd done much harm, with love, he began to be transformed. Think of those individuals in your life, in your own family, who you have conflict with. This is where we need to begin. If you're parents, your children are watching, you're modeling for them the way to be. If you have hatred in your heart, they will grow up with hatred. If you have disdain, you will teach them disdain. The day I put a knife to my father's throat, I asked him, why couldn't you just love me? Why couldn't you love me? Why couldn't you love me? I learned in these 30 years that I had to love myself. And that takes work. That takes searching and seeking. It's not a concept again, it's an action. On the 50th World Day of Peace, Pope Francis said, I wish peace for every man, woman, and child, and I pray that the image and likeness of God in each person will enable us to acknowledge one another as sacred gifts, endowed with immense dignity, especially in situations of conflict. Let us respect this, our deepest dignity, and make active nonviolence our way of life. How can we make nonviolence a way of life? Richard Rohr shares the work of John Deere, a nonviolence activist and author. And these are some of John Deere's words. Practicing nonviolence means claiming our fundamental identity as the beloved sons of daughters and daughters of the God of peace, and thus going forth into the world as a peacemaker to love every other human being. The problem is, we don't know who we are. The challenge then is to remember who we are, and therefore be nonviolent to ourselves and others. For 30 years, I searched for who I am. I had lost who I was. I began to lose it when I watched, at the age of 3, my father beating my mother. Growing up in adverse childhood experiences, domestic violence, addiction, sexual abuse, emotional, verbal, physical abuse, takes away who we are. In order to do and return to why we are here and who we are, it takes, as I said, work. Living nonviolence requires daily meditation, contemplation, study, concentration, and mindfulness. In our everyday lives, we need to be mindful, because just as mindfulness heals us, mindlessness leads to violence. Steady mindfulness and conscious awareness of our true identities leads to nonviolence and peace. We need to be always reflecting, always searching within ourselves. The deeper we go into mindful nonviolence, the more we live the truth of our identity as sisters and brothers of one another, sons and daughters of the God of peace. It is my belief, as it is for Richard Rohr and many others, that the social, economic, political implications of nonviolence, the practice of nonviolence, will change the world. If we are the sons and daughters of a loving Creator, every human being is our sister and our brother. And we can never hurt anyone on earth ever again, much less be silent in the face of war, in the face of starvation, in the face of racism, in the face of sexism, in the face of nuclear weapons and systemic injustice, in the face of environmental destruction. All these things that are being faced today, but in reality have always been with us. I'm often asked, well, what should a woman do when she's being abused? Should she just love her abuser? I know this is going to sound trite, but she needs to look within herself. Why would anyone live with abuse? I don't really have the answers to what she should do, but I do know that the answers are there and she has them. And she needs to really ask herself, how is this affecting me? How is this affecting my children? I recently was with family and I witnessed the husband's abusive behavior towards his wife. And I sat down with him and I said, you can't keep doing this because you're going to lose everything you have. I've been there. You're going to lose your wife. You're going to lose your children. You're going to lose your home. You're going to lose your job. You can't be such an angry, hostile human being. So you need to look at what happened to you. I also sat down with her and I said, you can't stay in a relationship where you're not loved, where you're not nurtured, where you're not valued, where you're not held up. One of her sons has an anxiety disorder. Where do you think that came from? Those of us who are in abusive relationships need to have an understanding of the impact that it's having on our children. My belief is that if we give men and women like myself the tools and the skills and the understanding that there's another way of being, we will end the cycle of violence because we will minimize for them and for their children the abusive traits that they are carrying. I want to read you another poem. Kindness. This poem is by Naomi Shihab Nye. Kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you can ride and ride thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, You must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know the kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows, and you see the size of the cloth, that is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowds of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. I was born in La Paz, Bolivia. I grew up speaking Spanish in my first 8 years of life. I want to read that poem in Spanish because it is a language that speaks to many people, including myself. Kindness, bondad. Antes de saber qué bondad realmente es, debes perder cosas, sentir que el futuro se disuelve en un momento como sal en un caldo debilitado. Lo que celebró en su mano, lo que ha contado y cuidadosamente guardado, todo esto debe irse para que sepa cómo el paisaje desolado puede estar entre las regiones de la bondad. Cómo viajar y viajar pensando que el autobús nunca se detendrá. Los pasajeros comiendo maíz y pollo mirarán por la ventana eternamente. Antes de aprender la suave gravedad de bondad, usted debe viajar donde el indio en un poncho blanco está acostado muerto al lado de la carretera. Usted debe ver cómo esto podría ser usted, como él también era alguien que viajaba a través de la noche con planes y el simple respiro que le mantuvo vivo. Antes de conocer la bondad como la cosa más profunda dentro de ella, usted debe saber el dolor como la otra cosa más profunda. Usted debe despertar con el dolor. Usted debe hablar con él hasta que tu voz atrape el hilo de todos los dolores y puedes ver el tamaño de la tela. Entonces, es solo la bondad que tiene sentido. Solo la bondad que ata los lazos de tus zapatos y te envía afuera para enviar cartas de correo y comprar el pan de cada día. La bondad que levanta tu cabeza sobre la multitud del mundo para decir, soy yo quien usted está buscando. Y luego se va con usted para todas partes como una sombra o un amigo. I love that last line. When you've experienced sorrow, when you've lost everything, then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the daily mail to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you have been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. I've come to learn that God is not some white guy in a beard sitting up in some sky, looking down, judging all the sins of the world. God, goddess, energy, whatever it is for you, Mother Earth, the great creator. Is a loving God. I come to learn that in order to be nonviolent, one must practice forgiveness. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons and daughters of God. Matthew, verse 5, chapter 9. Father Richard Rohr says that the spirit within us creates an unrelenting desire toward forgiveness and reconciliation. He tells us that the entire gospel reveals the unfolding mystery of forgiveness. It is the beginning, the middle, and the end of the gospel's transformative message. The energy of being forgiven in our unworthiness of it first breaks us out of a merit badge mentality. The ongoing experience of being forgiven when we don't even think we need it is necessary to renew our flagging spirit and keep us in the infinite ocean of grace. Toward the end of life, universal forgiveness of everything for being what it is becomes the only way we can see and understand reality and finally live at peace. Forgiveness given and forgiveness received are always the pure work of uncreated grace. Such unearned and undeserved forgiveness is necessary to break down the quid pro quo world that I call meritocracy. These are Father Richard's words. Grace recreates all things. Nothing new happens without forgiveness. We just keep repeating the same old patterns, illusions, and half-truths. Sometimes grace does not come immediately. But like Job, we sit in the ashes scraping our sores. Sometimes neither the desire nor the decision to forgive is present. And then we must grieve and wait. We must sit in our poverty, perhaps even admitting our inability to forgive the offender. That is when we learn how to pray, how to long and thirst for righteousness. A day of peace is nothing without action. A day of peace requires us to forgive. A day of peace requires us to take action in our own lives, to look deep within ourselves, to reflect on how we see the world, to look at what the world has taught us, what our experiences have taught us. I have a beautiful daughter. She's 19, going on 20. I worry for her. I worry for us. But I am so full of hope. Because it is people like you that have the power within yourselves to change the world. We must begin with ourselves. We must find love within ourselves. And then we must love unconditionally. And we must give of ourselves unconditionally.